Greetings, fellow mortals. Let me tell you a secret. I love the original Assassin's Creed games. While the first one was simply okay, Ezio's trilogy is one of my favorite character arcs in video games. That made what came later an even greater disappointment to me. Assassin's Creed 3 did not click with me when I first played it. Number 4 had amazing pirate gameplay, but failed to leave me with too much of a lasting mark involving its story. Rogue was fine, and the tie-in with Unity and all of that era of games could have been interesting if there had been actual direction to the overall story. Then, of course, Syndicate's story was a pile of garbage, but I did love the stealth in that one and Unity. Those did feel like the proper evolution of the originals. Of course, that style was completely abandoned for the RPG style of Assassin's Creed nowadays. Not a big fan of those. Origins, at least, had a memorable main character with Bayek, but Odyssey and Valhalla failed to have the main characters stand out. To be fair, that's because the player gets to choose the main character's personality in those games. Such a strategy didn't endear people to them like with Ezio Auditore de Firenze, because in the grand scheme of things, Ezio is an outlier in a sea of passable characters at best. Besides Ezio, my favorite main characters would be Edward and Bayek. Edward is far different than the other main characters. He was a selfish man that grew to be a worthy assassin. Bayek is a fun character, but a little flawed with how his story was executed. He's at his best when he's angry or interacting with his wife. His passion made me invested in his story. Besides those three main characters, I can't really say that I remember too much about the other protagonists. Altair was fine, but doesn't stand out among the crowd other than the tragedy that he faces in Revelations. Connor is a block of wood in a cool setting. Shay was fine, but didn't live up to his Templar potential. Arno was a simp. Jacob and Evie were irritating, and like I said earlier, the characters in the RPGs were stand-ins for how the character wanted to act. Overall, there is a sense of mediocrity when it comes to the main characters in most of the Assassin's Creed games. Why is that? Was Ezio's beloved status just a fluke? Well, the short answer is no. Ezio wasn't a fluke. He was a carefully constructed character whose entire life's journey was on display for us. Fans can experience his story from birth until death. We get to see him at his worst and at his best. Players grow to love Ezio because he's the only main character who got more than one mainline game to focus on him. There is a lot that writers can do with characterization with that much time in comparison to one single game. Of course, Assassin's Creed 2 did a great job of showing his journey even without Brotherhood and Revelations to help him. Even if we ignore the sequels, I think that Assassin's Creed 2 does an amazing job of demonstrating who Ezio is as a person. The game shocks the players by showing his actual birth. Then it jumps forward to his young adulthood. Because playing as a child sucks, please take note, Assassin's Creed 3 and Unity. Not seeing Ezio as an obnoxious and probably spoiled child helped. Not to say that Ezio wasn't a bit of a brat at the start of AC2. He was. He got into pointless fights, whined a bit about work, and seemed like a person who thought with his penis rather than his actual brain. Despite this, the game made players experience Ezio's life, his desires, and his relationship. We got a glimpse into his childhood simply through playing his everyday experience. It didn't last too long either. Right before the mundane situations could grow stale, the game tore it away by killing 3/5 of Ezio's family. From there, we saw the rage that consumed most of his life. After making sure that his remaining family was safe, Ezio dedicated himself to vengeance and trained to be a killer. At first, his assassinations were passionate, filled with hate, and uncontrolled. Due to the guidance that Mario provided, his temper flattened to a cooler, more understandable temperature. Rage turned into passion. Talent turned into skill. Machismo turned into charisma. His flirtatious manner became more endearing than laughable. We journeyed with him into manhood. Assassin's Creed 2 allowed us to see over 20 years of Ezio's life in extreme detail. It helped that we experienced him learning skills that later became mainstays in the series. In the end, we even see him overcome his desire for revenge in favor of sparing the man that killed his father and brothers. In many ways, letting Rodrigo live to see his ultimate failure and dying at the hands of his own family was a worse punishment than anything Ezio could have done. It was the perfect hero's journey, and it helped that the present day storyline was actually being used and weaved with Ezio's story. I remember having my jaw drop when Minerva addressed Desmond through Ezio. It actually felt like the present day storyline mattered. That's a plot point that completely fell away after Assassin's Creed 3. The fact that Ezio's story felt necessary for the future only further increased people's investments in his tale. By the time that the credits rolled in Assassin's Creed 2, the writers had cemented Ezio's place as an iconic character. Things only got better in Brotherhood. Besides a few minor side games and a few missions in other games, Ezio is the only person that is playable in not only 2 games but 3. The only other important character to appear so many times in the past is Haytham Kenway, but that's a character that deserves his own video. I think that the seafaring Assassin's Creed games would have been better with a larger focus on Haytham, where he's playable more and around far more often. What could have been. Enough of that though. Let's focus on Ezio. Brotherhood is a game that I feel every other game in the franchise tries to live up to. For a long time, Ubisoft desperately tried to recapture that magic and then eventually abandoned it to try to get out of its shadow. I don't think that they succeeded. Not that there aren't any good Assassin's Creeds without Ezio. Black Flag rivals Brotherhood as one of my favorites. Actually, Syndicate comes third simply for the grappling hook and zipline mechanics. It doesn't even matter that the story was garbled nonsense. I think that Brotherhood still stands as the king of Assassin's Creed. Of course, people could argue that the game's not too different than AC2. What I really think makes it stand out, besides the addicting gameplay and the amazing city of Rome, is the fact that Ezio is at his best. He's a master assassin. While he doesn't have much to develop, it's great to see him become a leader in the Assassin Brotherhood and train other people. Focusing on Rome allows Ezio to interact with the same characters on a regular basis. We get to see his personality in all of its glory. While we get to see Ezio become a man in Assassin's Creed 2, we get to experience him become a legend in Brotherhood. There's something to say about reveling in Ezio's growth as a leader of the Brotherhood and a mentor to the new assassins. He doesn't have a lot of personality to grow anymore, but the game does give further context to his love life. I did always wonder in AC2 why his flirtatious ways started and stopped at certain points. It actually feels as though the writers were thinking about his background and romance during his first game. It's a level of forethought that we never saw from Assassin's Creed ever again. I suppose that leads us to Revelations. I'm not going to lie, I do think that this is the weakest of the Ezio games, but it's still great to see him in the twilight years of his career. Ezio is older, more broken down, more tired, and a little bit grumpy in Revelations. He's seen and done it all at this point. In many ways, it feels like he's exasperated that he's still doing all of this. Revelation's biggest selling point is to finish up the Ezio and Altair storyline before moving on to Assassin's Creed 3. While a lot of Ezio's adventures in Revelations are somewhat forgettable, the writers did a good job of making this feel like the end of his career. Of course, the second biggest draw of AC Revelations is the love story of Ezio and Sofia. I always remember wondering when Ezio's genetic memories would end, and we got to see the process of him moving on from his previous romantic failures to find the love of his life. It is interesting to see those two interact, flirt, and grow to care for each other, especially because Sofia didn't even acknowledge Ezio at first. We could feel Ezio's hesitation because of the age difference and her neutral position in the Templar fight. I think the writers did a good job of making the players care about his relationship with his future wife. With Revelations over, Ezio accepted that he was part of something greater, something that he didn't understand. Kind of like all of us. It wasn't about him, and he was fine with that. That's why he happily retired, had 2 kids with Sophia, and lived his last few days in peace. At least until the events of Embers. Xiao Jun brought chaos into Ezio's peaceful life. He got to be a mentor and assassin one final time. Against his will, I might add, but it was amazing to see Ezio's skills bleed through even as his 65-year-old body was giving out on him. And just like we saw Ezio's birth, we see his death. This is where I feel it was kind of a misstep. Dying on a bench in public while seeing a vision of a man who acted like his younger self was interesting, but I feel that Ezio should have been given a more eventful death, where he was in bed and was surrounded by his family, his friends, and the assassins that he trained. I don't know. That's my headcanon at least. Ever since Ezio retired, Ubisoft has struggled to create a character as memorable as him. They came closest with Edward. He was different enough and had a transformation, but the broken way the story was told led to it being difficult to remember exactly what happened. There are so many hours between story missions, and Edward doesn't have a concrete goal other than making money. That makes it difficult for his story to keep people invested. Ezio always had a concrete goal, and that helped him. Almost every other protagonist after Ezio took after him in some way. Stories of revenge continued to pop up. It felt played out after Ezio's take was done so perfectly. Ezio also used him to perfection to hype up the current day storyline. Because of Ezio and his contributions, Assassin's Creed 3 became the top-selling AC game for a long time. I think until Valhalla, actually. Because of Ezio's character and story, Assassin's Creed gained a cemented status in the gaming industry. It's a franchise that's as recognizable as Call of Duty or even maybe Super Mario. When you think about Assassin's Creed, who do you see? I always picture Ezio's face. He is the one that continues to carry the franchise, because the writing for his stories was leagues ahead of all of the other games. After him, Ubisoft struggled to connect stories. Instead, they kept throwing ideas at the wall in hopes that something would work out. They pushed the franchise too hard, and it shows. If you ask me, they need to go back to the basics moving forward if they want people to continue to care. Create a new, intriguing character in a smaller setting where we can see that character interact with a wide range of wacky people on a regular basis. Focus on the writing. Figure out what you want to do with the present day storyline. And put in the time to make an actual plan. Ezio's story felt like it had thought and passion put into it. That's why he's the undisputed king of the franchise. Ubisoft can make someone that eventually rivals him. It could even be a female character. Just do it. Put in the work and write something amazing. If they do that, then I think that the franchise won't be coasting on Ezio's legacy anymore. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my takes on storytelling, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It would really help me out. Also, remember that I'll be self-publishing my novel, Dance of Frozen Death, at the start of 2023. I hope that you will check it out. I appreciate you. Do not despair.